Congratulations to the Seattle Seahawks for a great 2013 season, just like the Denver Broncos. Finished 13-3, were the prohibitive favorites before the season started to make it to Super Bowl 48. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is deliver to expectations and live up to and meet those expectations. And the Seattle Seahawks have done just that. A couple of days ago, I did a video about why I felt the Denver Broncos made it to Super Bowl 48. And today I'm going to do the same thing with the Seattle Seahawks. It's not just any one thing. It's not just any one player. Former Bulls general manager Jerry Krause, the idiot that he was, said a long time ago that players don't win championships, organizations do. Now, if you take his idiotic words and you tweak them a little bit, it makes a lot more sense if you said players alone don't win championships. Entire organizations do. Players, coaches, scouts, general managers, team presidents, ownership, they all play a role. And usually when you look every year at the two teams that made the Super Bowl, there are certain fundamental common links that those teams share that clearly explain why those teams are in the spot that they're in. I explained what those were a couple of days ago with the Denver Broncos, and I'm setting out now in this video to explain why the Seattle Seahawks have made it to Super Bowl 48. Just like with any major corporation or business, to me, a lot of times, if a business is doing well, it all starts at the top. If a business is doing poorly, it all starts at the top. And when you look at the Seattle Seahawks, this is an organization that's kind of rode some ebbs and flows throughout its history. But at one point in time in the 90s, they were in a bad way. They almost relocated. They were having some money troubles. They were playing in a stadium in the Kingdom that was increasingly falling apart by the year. There were a lot of problems for Seattle. And to me, a lot of things for this organization ultimately changed once Paul Allen bought the team in 1997. A man that made his billions in the business world, is a hell of a businessman, and really came in, I felt, and set up a very solid infrastructure in the Seattle Seahawks organization. He brought some legit business credentials. He brought with him the name that comes with being Paul Allen. He brought those deep pockets that he possesses with him. He did a lot of those things. But the one thing that I give Paul Allen a lot of credit for, with all the money that he had and all of this and all of that, he understood that he knew what he knew, but even more importantly, he knew what he didn't know. He didn't end up being an idiot like a Daniel Snyder. He didn't end up being an egomaniac that has proven now that he doesn't know anything in Jerry Jones. Paul Allen knew that he had to bring in football people to run the day-to-day operations of the football side of his organization. You look back when he brought in Mike Holmgren in 1999, that was an organization changer. There's no question about it. The Seahawks had quite a run of success under Mike Holmgren for several years. And then you look at it. During this time, since Paul Allen has taken over, they got out of the Kingdom, which used to be a very loud place, but it was an archaic stadium. It was past its prime. It was falling apart. And they get CenturyLink Field. This state-of-the-art stadium in 2002, I believe it was, that has really become the identity of the Seattle Seahawks in a lot of ways, along with the 12th man. It really has become the identity for that organization. You know that you are in for a hell of a time if you're going to go try and win in Seattle against that Seahawks team. But, you know, in order to be a world-class organization, sometimes you have to feel world-class, and in order to feel world-class, you have to look world-class. And that stadium is a beautiful stadium that makes them look world-class, something that Paul Allen helped make happen. So again, good organizations, good businesses, that quality leadership comes from the top and it trickles down, and it has a bearing and an impact on the entire organization. Just like it did after the 2009 season. A lot of people may look at it now and say, well, what a great hire. Everybody knew Pete Carroll was going to work out. This is the same Pete Carroll that had failed more than once before at the NFL level as a head coach, who went down to USC and became a legend in the college ranks, but was leaving at a time when his program was about to be really looked at by the NCAA and get placed in some major probationary and sanction trouble by that corrupt-ass organization, and Pete Carroll knew it, and he got out while it was good. So it was not a universally loved move when they brought in Pete Carroll to be the next head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, when they had just brought in a head coach and fired him after 1 year in Jim Mora Jr. The bottom line is this was a kind of controversial hire. It definitely had some appealing attributes where it looked like it could be a very successful hire, but it also had some things that made you wonder, could this be a hire where 3 years from now they're hiring yet another head coach? Well, obviously, Paul Allen and that organization gambled, and that gamble paid off big, and Pete Carroll has been wonderful for this organization. They've made the playoffs 3 times in his 4 years, 2 division titles. They've won a playoff game each of the 3 years that they made the playoffs, and obviously now they find themselves 1 win away from a Super Bowl championship in Super Bowl 48. So Pete Carroll has done a lot of things right. And one of the major areas that he has done a lot of things right in is the NFL draft. Now, Pete Carroll has truly done a, dare I say, splendid job for the most part with this Seahawks organization in the draft over the past 4 years. I will harp on it time after time after time after time. In order to play championship level football in the NFL, you must draft well. And to consistently compete year in and year out, you must consistently draft well year in and year out. And there are very few exceptions to this. And Pete Carroll at times has done some things that have made people scratch their heads and they've questioned it. But by and large, when you look back on it now after 4 years of a body of work, you look and you say more often than not that the son of a bitch knows what he's doing when it comes to the NFL draft. You look at his first draft in 2010. Takes Russell Okung in the first round. Had a second first-round pick. A lot of people assumed he was going to take a safety from USC, Taylor Mays. He said, ignore that bullshit. I'm going to take the guy with more upside. He took Earl Thomas, the safety out of Texas. Now, that's the same Earl Thomas that you could argue is one of the very best, if not the very best, free safeties in all of the National Football League. He got him with the 14th overall pick, an all-pro player with the 14th overall pick. That's pretty outstanding stuff. Getting Golden Tate in the second round. Cam Chancellor, an all-pro level safety. You got him in the 5th round. So just think about this. Tate has his moments, good and bad. He has those moments where he flashes star potential and then other games where he disappears. Okung is good. Still hasn't, I don't feel like, reached his full potential. But you got Earl Thomas in the 1st round, an all-pro free safety. Then you got an all-pro strong safety in the 5th round in Cam Chancellor. It's outstanding. Just absolutely outstanding. That draft class there alone is the beginning of building something special in Seattle. Now, one thing to understand is that when it comes to the NFL draft, draft picks are currency. And they are currency that you can spend immediately by, drafting somebody at a certain spot. You can accumulate more of that currency by trading down or trading players to gather picks, trading down to get additional picks, what have you. Or you can spend more of that money, more of that currency, save less, and move up to get players, whatever the case might be. But during the 2010 season, the Seattle Seahawks made an organization-changing trade by giving up a 4th-round pick in 2011 and a 5th-round pick in 2012 and took a gamble, a big gamble that has paid off huge by bringing in beast mode Marshawn Lynch from the Buffalo Bills. You might sit there and say now, why in the hell would the Bills ever trade him? Remember, this is a Marshawn Lynch who had some trouble staying healthy and has some trouble with the law as well. This was a gamble, but it was one of those low-risk, high-reward gambles that has paid off tremendously. You look at this now, and this is potentially one of the great trades, and I mean this, in NFL history. You got Marshawn Lynch for a 4th and 5th round pick. Think about that. That's outstanding stuff. And then when you look at what the Seahawks did in the 2011 draft, so you basically could say they give a 4th round pick and a 5th round pick the following year to get Marshawn Lynch. But you look at it, in the 5th round, they get the best corner in the National Football League in Richard Sherman out of Stanford. In the 5th round. In the 6th round, they got the other kid, Maxwell, that'll be starting opposite him at corner. They got him in the 6th round. In the 7th round, you know, when Richard Sherman tipped the ball that Kaepernick threw to Crabtree in the NFC Championship game, it was 7th round pick Malcolm Smith that was there that made the heads-up play to be in the right position to be able to make that play on the ball, to intercept that ball and end that NFC Championship game and send Seattle to the Super Bowl. So, excuse me, 3 defensive starters right there come from the 5th, 6th, and 7th round. Their outside linebacker, right, 4th rounder, also a starter. You know, those are 3 guys right there. 3 guys that were starters. The 4th guy, right, obviously being hurt. But I'm saying 3 guys that are starting on the Super Bowl team were acquired in the same draft in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round. And when you factor in a Marshawn Lynch basically being acquired for a 4th round pick in this draft, it makes up for a couple of misses at the top like James Carpenter and so on and so forth. And you go to 2012, they gambled on Bruce Irvin in the 1st round, but then they followed that up with a couple of solid picks after that. You know, Bobby Wagner, the middle linebacker out of Utah State in the 2nd round. Then in the 4th round, you get Robert Turbin, your backup to Marshawn Lynch, and a solid backup of that, giving you some quality depth. But the big key here is in the 3rd round, after they had just given Matt Flynn a good amount of money in the offseason in free agency, the Seattle Seahawks found their franchise quarterback in the 3rd round in Russell Wilson. 3rd round. With all the talk before that draft of people like Luck and Griffin and Tannehill and Whedon and so on and so forth, it's a guy in Russell Wilson, a 3rd round pick who played at NC State, got basically pushed aside for Mike Glennon and went to Wisconsin. A 3rd round pick that has established himself as the face of the Seahawks franchise, the franchise quarterback that they needed. And you now have been able to get a guy that is a great locker room presence, a great on the field and off the field leader, and a franchise quarterback in the 3rd round. Think about that. So here's what you get. If you're looking at it from the standpoint of what have the Seahawks been able to do in the draft that has worked so well for them. They got Earl Thomas at pick number 14, All-Pro in 2010. In the 5th round, they took Cam Chancellor. 5th round, All-Pro. You look at 2011, Richard Sherman, All-Pro, 5th round. 2012, Russell Wilson, Pro Bowler, Super Bowl quarterback, franchise quarterback, 3rd round pick. When you hit, and people talk about all the time getting those stars in the 1st round and in the 2nd round. Yeah, that's where you get some of those stars. But championship organizations are ultimately made drafting between rounds 3 through 7. That's where you get the talent. That's where you have to hit on some of those guys that could come in and become stars in your system. And the Seattle Seahawks and Pete Carroll have done a tremendous job of that. And that's big, major reason why they are this close to winning their first Super Bowl as an organization. Especially when you look after the 2012 offseason, you're able to bring in Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill for like a combined $10 million as a 1-year rental. And you throw them into a mix that already has, you know, a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. You bring in 2 more legit edge rushers. This is a team, mind you, that in the Super Bowl, 15 of their 22 starters will have been starters drafted by the team. 15 out of 22. And 9 of those 11 starters are on the defensive side of the ball, were drafted by the Seahawks. And not all 1st round picks. Yes, there's the Earl Thomases, sure. But like I said, you have freaking Cam Chancellor was a 5th round pick. Richard Sherman, 5th round pick. You know, think about that. Russell Wilson on the offensive side of the ball, 3rd round pick. You get Marshawn Lynch in a trade for a 4th and 5th round pick. Hats off to the Seattle Seahawks. The Denver Broncos did their thing and went through a lot of different steps in the process that ultimately made them a Super Bowl contending team. The Seattle Seahawks did a lot of great things. They had much more success over the past few years in the draft than the Denver Broncos, so that way they didn't have to go as hard in free agency, but they did when they needed to, when it was right, when it was made sense. And now the Seahawks find themselves 1 game away from winning their first ever Super Bowl. Congratulations to them. They've done a great job as an organization, and the good and great thing for the Seahawks organization and their fan base is or maybe the Denver Broncos window to win a Super Bowl is this season, maybe next season, you could look at the Seahawks and you could argue their window is much bigger. They could have a 4 to 6 year window where they could maybe win 2 or 3 Super Bowl championships. And that's ultimately a great feeling to have, I think, if you're involved with the Seahawks organization or you're a Seattle Seahawks fan.